Hey, I just want to say thank you so much for listening along to the 80s to 60s podcast. This is a relaunch from the podcast that I did a while back. And, it's really a platform for me to be able to share a lot of the insights into my academy and, with the guys I'm working with at an NCAA level, professional level, then my intermediate golfers. And I really want this podcast to be oriented around helping you score better, having better strategies, practical strategies that actually work on the golf course, right? I think the big thing that I've seen in the YouTube and Instagram community when it comes to learning your game is that there's not enough actionable practices that you can actually take right to the golf course to actually start to score better. So, one thing I did before I launched the podcast is I went onto my Instagram and polled about 150 golfers, which to me is a pretty good sample size, and asked, what do you really want to learn about? What are the things that you're really lacking? So I put up, I could just scroll it to here. The four options I had were swing technique, TrackMan analytics, scoring tactics, then mental game. And by a mile, like 80% of the votes came through with scoring tactics. And, scoring tactics can really, cover a wide range of topics. And, I'm going to really start you out at focusing on things on the swing. So when, if you're looking for something that is really going to, propel your game to the next level, I'm excited to dive into this a little bit more. It's going to be a pretty unedited, unfiltered podcast. I'm going to really say what's on my mind. I'm going to really talk about the things that have worked for me as well too, to go from 80s to 60s. And we're just going to try and keep it as anecdotal as possible. So I would recommend get your notebook out and really just follow along at a slow pace. And you might only take one or two things from this podcast, but the big thing is that you can have simple actionable things that you can actually take right to the golf course and see some immediate improvements. And if you're curious to work with me one-on-one, I have a 3-month online mentorship, and what comes with it are 6 lessons, 15 game guides, 24/7 chat, weekly tutorials, so you'll get a total of 12 tutorials. Now, what is a tutorial? Basically, I'll take one topic, like let's say bunker play or how to hit out of fairway bunkers, and I'll do a really detailed breakdown on it. And you'll also get lifetime access to my group chat. And then the big thing too with the 3-month mentorship is you get a custom practice plan. So for me, every time I work with someone online, I want to make sure it's very catered towards you. I don't believe in these quick 3 to 5 minute swing analysis, where it takes 2 weeks to get back to you. The big thing for me online is I want you to feel like you have a coach in your pocket, where in between lessons, in between practice sessions, you can ask me questions. And we're really going to work off of a very detailed framework that I have used hundreds of times over with my clients in person and online. And I'd also like to say thank you so much to my sponsors, Bunker Thread and TaylorMade. They really are the lifeblood of Lancaster Golf Performance, and they're both great organizations that have really helped me out so much. So, okay, let's get right into it here. Again, like I mentioned before, I pulled those 4 major topics in the swing technique, TrackMan analytics, scoring, and mental game, and by far scoring came out on top. And the big thing I always start out with scoring is, to me, the essence of scoring better, it comes down to hitting it straighter. Like, you can have a really great day on the greens, but if you're hitting it all over the map, it's really hard to score. And I always go back to where are your driver TrackMan analytics at, and if you can figure out those the story behind why that's happening, it becomes a lot easier to to kind of understand your recipe for straight. And that's what I always talk about in my first lesson that I do with a golfer, is what is the recipe for hitting a little bit straighter. The 3 main numbers you've probably maybe heard me talk about before on my Instagram is club path, face angle, and attack angle. Right now, having a good recipe for those 3 numbers makes it a lot easier for you to hit it straight. I'll work off an example from myself about 5 or 6 years ago when I decided I wanted to start competing again. I looked at those 3 numbers on a TrackMan, and I was always a pretty good player. Like, I got down to a scratch level when I was 15 years old, completely lost my game, but came back to it, and I really wanted to understand the data behind my swing. So I looked at club path. My club path was 6 degrees in to out. My face angle was typically 2 degrees shut, and then my attack angle was about 3 degrees up. So I got a pass for the attack angle. That was fine, but looking at that club path number, I definitely saw some inefficiencies, and there was one number that I thought I could really improve upon. Now, if you think about it, right, if my club path is going 6 degrees to the right and my face angle is going 2 degrees to the left, there's an 8-degree separation right there. So what that essentially means is my timing has to be really good on any given day to hit it my best. And if you have a good timing day, you have a good day. If you have a bad timing day, you have an awful day on the golf course, right? And it could mean, when you get that face to path separation by more than 4 degrees, it could mean misses up to about 40 to 60 yards, which, as we know as golfers, is just hard to control, right? So the first thing that I'm always going to do when I get someone in person with me, or even online, that's the big thing, is any of my online clients, they have to send me their TrackMan data. I want to know exactly what that ratio is like. And I've seen, I've given close to 10,000 lessons now at this point, and I've pretty much mapped out all of my clients' TrackMan data. I've seen separations upwards of 10 degrees and downwards of 1 degrees in terms of that face to path ratio. And typically, like the college guys that I work with are usually 1 or 2 degrees in separation, or 0.5 degrees in separation. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be on 0 every time with a club path of 0 and a face angle of 0. I have some great players that have a club path of 3 degrees to the right and the face angle is 1 degrees open, right? So that little 2 degree differential creates a small little push draw. So, that would be my starting point for you. Get on TrackMan, and here's the thing too about TrackMan is that there's a lot of there's a lot of taboo against going on a TrackMan because it's one of those things of paralysis by analysis. You see too many numbers, it can just be completely overwhelming. And it's true, like when you log onto a TrackMan and hit one golf shot, you're going to get, I think, roughly about 32 metrics on your ball and your club, and that's just too much for the human brain to handle. It's too much for a really expert golf coach to handle. So you can use filter settings to just filter out the numbers that you want. And you start with that club path, you start with that face angle. I mean, the most typical one that I'm going to see for a right-handed golfer is the club path moving anywhere from 5 to 10 degrees to the left and the face angle being on the open side. So you get that 6 to 7 degree differential, and that's why about 80% of golfers slice it. So now the main question becomes, okay, well, how do we actually fix it? Because it's great that I can talk about all these numbers, but it doesn't really mean anything if you can't fix it. So where I always start golfers out on is looking at their shoulder rotation for club path, okay? Because the shoulders are connected to the arms, are connected to the hands, are connected to the club. So if you can move your shoulders, which is the biggest unit, move them in a more efficient way, it becomes a lot easier to neutralize your club path. So the simple thing I want you to think about here, and you can maybe even stop the video after I tell you this and sort of feel it in your own swing. If you slice the ball, more than likely in the downswing you have too much shoulder rotation, so the shoulders spin open. And if you hook the ball in the downswing, the shoulders under rotate. They get stuck a little bit. If anything, you have more shoulder rotation in the backswing, but not enough in the follow through, right? So what I always say for my drawers, the golf ball that I'm working with, feel more shoulder rotation in the downswing. And that's the same thing that I did to fix my swing because I was hooking it so much. And then for a slicer, I want you to almost feel like your back stays to the target for longer. Now, those two little tips are going to neutralize your club path. The thing we have to keep in mind is if you just fix your club path, you might even hit it worse, right? You have to fix the face angle too, because I can take a slicer who has their club path 7 degrees to the left and then get their club path 0, but that means that their face angle is pushing even more and more to the right, and they might have their face angle open by about 10 degrees. So this is where the face angle equation comes in, and a lot of it comes down to, okay, what are the wrist patterns in the swing, and then what is your grip like? I think a simple way to start out for you would be to look at your grip and see how it correlates to your face angle. So if you have a very strong grip, right, where you can see a lot more of your lead hand knuckles when you look down on it, most likely your face is going to be very shut. And if you have a grip that is very weak, where the thumb is more on top of the grip, then it typically means you're going to be hitting it more out to the right as a right-handed golfer. So I'll leave that with you. The simple example I would use, if you're a slicer, I want to see way less shoulder rotation in the downswing, and I want to see a much stronger grip, okay? That's number one. If you can get those two numbers down, the face to path ratio, and just understand your numbers on a much deeper level, it's going to be a game changer for you. And this is one thing that I learned from, I look a lot at TrackMan analytics, that the little library they have on which anyone can access. And I look at there's got to be more than about 50 tour pros on there, and you see their face to path ratios, and they're all in a pretty tight range, right? Some are 4 to 3, some are 3 to 4, some are 1 to 0. You're never going to really see 0 to 0, and I don't really recommend chasing the 0-0 equation. I will, in a lesson with one of my clients, I like to show them what it feels like to get to 0-0, and it just to really give you the feeling that, oh, this is your formula for straight. And that's what I always talk about, is getting the formula for straight down. Now, what you can do when you start to go to the range, and this is kind of the next segment I wanted to talk about when it comes to scoring better, is how do you actually evolve your swing to the point where you're seeing predictable TrackMan numbers from the club path and face angle perspective on the golf course. Now, it's going to start with playing the miss game on the driving range. So what I mean by that is, if you see a certain ball flight, you can correlate it to a certain TrackMan analytic. So if your club path is moving 3 degrees to the right. Now, there obviously are going to be other considerations here, like where you hit it on the toe, what your attack angle is like. But let's just talk in terms of general numbers. No data is perfect, but you can use data to aid yourself. If you see your club path moving 4 degrees to the right and you're a drawer of the golf ball, you're probably going to see a curving right to left shot or a pushing shot more often than not. So that's data for you to understand. Okay, that's the first miss that I really need to be aware of, right? Now, if you see straight pulls to the left or straight pulls to the right, straight pushes to the right, it typically is going to mean face angle misses where your hands are off, right? So I always call it in a lesson, whether it's an online lesson or an in-person lesson, your miss chart. If you have more awareness on your miss chart, it becomes easier to just use data to fix your swing. So if you start off, your first 10 swings and you see pull, 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 then okay, my hands are a little bit too strong on the club, or I'm over releasing my hands. Let's back off of that feel a little bit, and that'll typically fix it pretty quickly. Now, when you take a data-minded approach to your driving range shots, you're going to see anomalies, and that's why we have to look at our bulk of shots as a data set. And every data set, there's an anomaly, and if you can just take those ones out, like you chunked one or you duffed one, like a shot you wouldn't typically see, what that is your motor pattern is just getting, your coordination has been thrown off because you're trying a new move. So your coordination is going to be down a little bit. And that's been proven by some of the doctors I've spoken with in biomechanics. And they talk about how, anytime you change a motor pattern, your coordination is thrown way out of line. And typically, if you're just starting out with a new move that's a little bit more complex, you might even have half to 75% of your shots where you're seeing anomalies in the data set because your coordination is way off. And this is where we can actually take a step backwards and look at, okay, what are the first things we can do to really improve our swing before the driving range. And this is one thing I always do with my clients in more of a northern climate. I want to see them do a ton of mirror work. If you can get a ton of work into a net with just a 9-iron. But basically, on a ratio, anytime I start someone out on a swing change, I want to get them on a ratio of 3-to-1 from practice swings to actual swings, so they can be more creative with the movement. They're not so ball bound, because we're definitely locked into the ball when we're actually just trying to get after it with feeling the movement. And there's always going to be this push and pull between the old swing and the new swing. So if you give yourself, I always say as many reps as you can get into your full length mirror at home. Most people have a full mirror at home. They can just visually see the movement, and we are visual creatures, so it can really make a big difference. Okay, now the next thing is getting into the net. Now, what I typically recommend into the net is using alignment sticks, using a lot of video feedback, and you're just looking for one little piece, right? Like if we're talking face angle, you're looking for where are your hands at? Can you actually see that you have a strong grip, or can you see that you have a more neutral to weak grip? And you can take a face-on video from the side view of the target to know that. And then you can also slowly look on video at where your shoulders are rotating. So if you're seeing those shoulders really spin open more aggressively, then you know that you're probably not doing it right. So someone who would be a good draw model would be like a Tommy Fleetwood, where you're not going to see excessive shoulder rotation in the downswing. His shoulders will open more a little bit post impact to hold off of his cut, right? So that's kind of getting to the mirror and the network. And then now moving into the next level would be your on course, right? So what are you actually going to do when you take it to the course? And this is a big thing for me. Is yes, we are using data, we're using video feedback, but we can pretty much throw most of that out the window when we actually get onto the course. And this is where I get big into, I don't want you to think your swing thoughts, I want you to feel your swing thoughts. And having a very strategic pre-shot routine where you're focusing on one element at a time from a technical standpoint is the only way to go about it. Like the guys I have the toughest, and the gals that I have the toughest time with my academy, are the ones who come in with 5 or 6 different ideas on what they actually want to improve. And it's paralysis by analysis. There's too much going on. If you have one swing thought, that's amazing. If you have 2 swing thoughts, that's a little bit too much. If you have 3 swing thoughts or more, good luck, right? So when you actually take to the golf course, I want you to really feel the movement twice, step in and hit it. And if you just do that as your pre-shot routine, where you overfeel it twice and step in and try and emulate what you felt, you're going to be far better off than thinking about a checklist or getting over analytical, or trying, for the first 6 holes I have this swing thought, the next 6 holes I have this swing thought, the next 6 holes I have this swing thought. I can honestly say in the last 4 years, I have not changed my swing thought on the golf course. And I've gone from someone who is struggling to break in the 80s to high 70s on tougher golf courses. And now I'm threatening shooting in the 60s on very tough golf courses, and a scoring average of 71.5 on a 7,000 yard golf course, on my home course. So, I obviously have more work to do. I want to really push myself into the 60s, but having that simple minded approach that correlates to the data on your swing is going to do wonders for you, right? Now, we'll talk about one more thing just quickly in terms of the progression of how you work on your swing, and that's getting ready for your tournaments, right? So when it comes to tournaments, you're kind of piecing all of this together, but I want you to spend a lot of time in practice. 80% of your practice time should be from 150 yards and in. And it sounds cliche, but it is the truth, right? I have found for me this year personally, I didn't have a great year of tournament play. And in the lead up to tournament play, I've done this 2 years in a row. Now I was, in all honesty, I was too focused on making sure my swing was okay. So I would allocate about 80 to 90% of my practice time to working on my swing. Now, I hit it pretty well, right? But putt terribly, chipped terribly, and had a lot of rounds that were in the 75 to 80 range, 73 to 77 range, where I had 35 plus putts per round, right? Now, again, this is custom to me. This is my game, but what I've done on the second half of the season, I've become a lot better with my scoring. Haven't played in many tournaments, but my scoring has really gone down where I stopped caring about my swing too much. I'd maybe get 30 to 50 warm-up swings in on the range where I'm really focused on that one single feel of more rotation in my shoulders, and I just go out and play. So I'm spending a lot less time really caring about the swing and a lot more time really grinding on the short game. So the next part of this podcast here, I want to keep this really brief, but I think it's probably going to be the most important thing, and that's how your practice plan should actually look if we're talking about how to score your best, right? So I really do think that if you're in off-season mode, 80% of your practice should be geared towards technically improving your swing and improving your fitness levels. That's absolutely key. Like if you have the beauty of the Canadian season up here in northern climates is we have roughly 5 to 6 months to actually get after our swing technique and our fitness without worrying too much about our game. So give yourself, even if you're down in Texas or California or the southern states or in a southern climate like Australia, give yourself a 3 to 4 month or even a 5 month window where you put the clubs away a little bit and you focus on your extreme weaknesses, right? Like for me, I'll be honest, my fitness level is not where it needs to be. So for the next 5 to 6 months, I'm going to spend 5 days a week lifting, stretching, working on my cardio, getting myself in the top physical shape that I possibly can. So you just have to have that honest space where you can really look at your own skills and just ask yourself, if I spent the next 6 months working on this absolute weakness, how much better can I actually get? And the truth is, I've done this many times with my own game. I've done this many times with my clients' game. You're not going to lose your strengths. Like your strengths will definitely need maintenance when you come back to them, but it's like riding a bike. If you're a really good putter, you're a really good chipper, you're not going to lose that skill set. You're just going to have to kind of work it back into your game, okay? So really, again, when you have no golf to play, 80% of your focus should be on technical improvements and fitness improvements. Now, and the other 20% you work on just making sure you're maintaining putting and chipping and the small things. When it comes to actually being in season and playing your best in the golf season, and I know that a lot of my clients down south right now are starting to really ramp up their season, you want to be focusing 80% of your practice on scoring habits. And what I mean by that is if you're gonna drop 50 balls and hit a bunch of chip shots, it's probably not going to do a whole much for you when it actually comes to getting it out on the golf course. I want you to do stuff like a lot of up and down challenges, right? So you're going to do, just off the top of my head, 18 holes of up and down, where the first 6 holes are very easy shots. The next 6 holes are medium shots. Then the next six holes, you're stepping on a ball or you're hitting a lot of downhill shots to tight pins, and you're just trying to get your ball up and down. Every hole is a par 2, and if you can strive to get better than 6 over par, then you're doing pretty darn good. You could even just use the 0 for 1, 0 for 2. If you can get 12 out of 18 up and downs, you're really, really doing a good job right there. Now, for me, when it comes to a big game that I have coming up or a big tournament that I have coming up with my short game, I'm mainly doing up and down challenges. I'm also doing 18 holes worth of putting where I'll actually simulate my statistics. So I will typically hit 12 out of 18 or 13 out of 18 greens in a tournament round. So I want to simulate what that actually would feel like on the putting green. So I'll have one lag putt, and then I'll have one medium putt and one short putt. And the medium putt and the short putt are birdie putts, and the lag putt is a long birdie putt. And it basically kind of simulates trying to get up and down like a really tough lag putt. And I'm going to keep score. For me, the goal, if I can get 4 under or 5 under or better, then I know that that's going to translate out onto the golf course. There's also a great drill that I learned from Ralph Bauer. He was my coach for a long time, where it's a strokes gained putting game, where you hit 1 putt from 3 feet, 2 putts from 6 feet, 1 putt from 9 feet, 1 putt from 12 feet, all on the same line. And if you can get 3 out of 5 or better, that's 0 strokes gained. 4 out of 5 is 1 stroke gained, and then 5 out of 5 is 2 strokes gained. If you get 2 out of 5, it's minus 1 strokes gained, and then 1 out of 5 is minus 2 strokes gained. So you can actually start to calculate your strokes gained through that drill. I absolutely love that drill, and you got to give credit to Ralph for that one through his tour read system. I would also recommend checking out the tour read system as a sidebar. So, as you can kind of tell, what the main thing I'm getting at when it comes to your putting practice or your chipping practice, that should be 80% of your practice, and it should be really you gamifying it, right? So making it as close to the actual thing as possible. I think we definitely feel more pressure, but we also focus a little bit harder when we can actually put a score to what we're working towards. If you just stand there and hit 50 chip shots or stand there and hit 20 putts before you go and play, what is that really doing for you getting in the mindset of actually being out on the golf course? And that's why most golfers are range rats, where they can show up on the range, hit 10 perfect shots, make 5 putts, and then go out and play and just be an absolute mess, because there's no consequences to the way you're actually practicing. And this kind of gets into the next piece of when you're actually practicing your swing, when you've put in the good technical work that we talked about earlier. I want you to be doing what's called upright training, where you're going to pick 2 very tight targets out in the distance, maybe about like 20 feet apart, and you're going to do a 5-ball test and see if you can get 5 9-irons through that little upright. And then you're going to do that with your 7-iron, then your 4-iron, then your driver. And if you do more and more of that upright training, where you almost set an unrealistic fairway out there and basically make it harder than what the consequence would actually be out on the golf course. So if you hit it left of the upright or right of the upright, that's a ball out of bounds. You have to keep it in bounds. I always find if you're going to do the 5-ball test, a good goal would be to be about 3 out of 5 or better, because you want to make it very difficult on yourself. Now, I find the mental effect with that upright training is that when you get actually out onto the golf course on the tougher holes, the tough holes actually feel a little bit wide, because you've been priming yourself with hitting through an upright over and over and over again. I would really only recommend that, like, if let's say you have a tournament that's 4 weeks out, you obviously want to protect your confidence a little bit. So look at it as like a training camp, right? Like the first 3 weeks of that training camp, do the upright training. And then the last week on the range, just get out with a 9-iron, just do your best to feel good about your swing. And just to end off with practice habits, I really want to keep it short and simple today for you, to get as much as you can to help your game with scoring. Become a master of short putting. Short putting ripple effects to every other piece in your game, right? If you're a really good short putter, it makes your long putts easy. It makes your medium putts. You're not worried about 3 putting, because you know that from 6 feet and in, you're really good. It also improves your confidence with your chipping, because if you happen to hit a chip to 8 feet and you're really good inside 10 feet, you're not going to be as stressed out about it. Now, if you look at what PGA Tour players do, is they're spending about 90% of their practice on their putting inside that 10-foot circle, pretty much at a station the whole time. The one drill my coach would always get me to do growing up was I have to make 50 in a row from 4 feet before I leave the putting green at the end of the night. You could do it at home, get a little shot glass or a penny, see if you can roll as many over that line from 4 feet as you possibly can. Little stuff like that, where you have to build momentum and there's a score attached to it. And if you miss, like let's say you get to, you're trying to do 50 in a row from 4 feet and you get to, the 45th putt, you're going to start to feel in your hands. You're going to start to feel the nerves, and that's what we want. We want practice that simulates pressure, that where there's an actual consequence to it. So that's all I got for you today. Scoring habits, I want you to write out your own little practice plan that you can do based upon this. Think about the hands and the shoulders for your TrackMan analytics and how you can start to make the dispersion a little bit tighter. And then when it comes to the short game, write out 4 or 5 drills that you can do that easily allow you to have consequences, and then also scoring, where you actually feel like you're out on the golf course. Best of luck, and again, subscribe to the podcast. You're going to get some amazing knowledge to help you play your best in 2024 and beyond.